The source for learning means different things to different people. Some people think of us as a regular 501c3 nonprofit. Some people think of us as a licensee for microwave frequencies provided by the FCC. Some people think of us as an aggregator of K-12 content free to teachers. Some people think of us as an online early childhood assessment system. We're a number of those things. But to really understand how we evolved into those various services, I think we need to go back and look at some of the history of how the telecommunications industry in our space evolved. In the early 1960s, there was some effort to provide reserved space for education within the television spectrum. So in 1963, the FCC relegated 31 television channels and made them specifically reserved for educational use. There was one individual who sort of took an interest in everything that was going on, and his name was John Curtis. John was a very interesting person because he came from a one-room schoolhouse, one teacher, 23 students in upstate New York. And John was sort of the class clown. He was always in trouble. And his teacher, Ethel Palmer, recognized some real potential in John and sort of grabbed him by the nape of the neck and said, "John, get with it. You've got a lot more talent than you're showing." And I think she realized that John was acting out because he was bored. So she would hop on a train, take the 110-mile trip into New York City, into the libraries, to get resources, bring them back, and provide John with some extra material and challenging him to learn more information. He went through the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in 2 years. He, with Mrs. Palmer's help, received a scholarship to the Lawrenceville Prep School in New Jersey, one of the most prestigious boarding prep schools. From there, he went to Yale University, graduated with an engineering degree, and went on to a very successful career as a communications and electronic engineer. Toward the end of his career, when he was nearing retirement, he decided he wanted to give something back to education to sort of pay back the generosity of his teacher from the one-room schoolhouse. And so he wanted to dedicate the rest of his life to bringing telecommunications resources into education for students. How was he going to do that? In his mind, he formed 5 different corporations that he wanted to see as a stepping stone to what his dream was going to be. The first idea was formed with some of his friends. It was the INI Group. And the INI Group was a research corporation. That corporation let 2 contracts to 2 different companies with the exact same assignment, and that was find a microcosm of the United States in a small geographic area that had the same economic divisions, the same social stratus, and so he could use that as a test bed. And believe it or not, they both came back with the same answer, which was the Tidewater area of Southern Virginia. So John moved from New Jersey down to Williamsburg, Virginia, and he decided he was going to aggregate some of the educators in the area. So he brought in William and Mary, Old Dominion, some of the K-12 school districts, and he formed in 1973 the Center for Excellence, or CENTEX, as he called it. CENTEX became his laboratory. He was going to use this facility to test his various theories on how to use telecommunications in education. So he provided regular instructional television to students, but he also provided material for the gifted, for the handicapped, and he did a lot of interesting things with connecting or interconnecting the cable systems through these ITFS frequencies. He had a mobile truck that went out to try to connect with satellites. He was doing a lot of very innovative things. Since he knew what was going on at CENTEX, he wanted to find out what was going on with other ITFS systems around the United States. So in 1976, he received a grant to go out and study the utilization of what these other systems were doing, bring that back, and file a report, which he did. The advantage of not just knowing what other people were doing was well received, but he also knew then all the various operators who ran these systems. And so he got them together and he activated the third company that was in his mind, which was the National Instructional Telecommunications Council. It was a way for all these various individual systems to share information. Because he did that, these folks have stayed together and continued to exchange information. That organization's changed its name to the National ITFS Association and now the National EBS Association. So it has now remained as the trade organization for those of us who hold these types of frequencies. John then thought, now that we know each other and now that we have a way of talking with one another, let's interconnect all our systems by satellite. So he activated his fourth idea, which was the Network for Instructional TV. And the idea of the Network for Instructional TV was to interconnect all these systems by satellite, exchange programming with one another, and make it a little more economical for us to serve the various students that we had in our respective areas. We also applied for channels in other communities. And unfortunately, John did not live long enough to see the fulfillment of his fifth idea, which was to interconnect all these educators globally around the world. His idea was to have satellites that would interconnect countries and the students within those countries. Oddly enough, the emergence of the internet sort of fulfilled John's dream, but when you think back to somebody going through the process of coming up with all these ideas back in the late 60s, he was obviously a very forward-thinking and unique individual. We've built our organization on a public-private partnership in terms of the technology. But I think we also want to consider building the same public-private partnerships for the services that we have, like MySciLife. There might be other organizations interested in the critical thinking skills that happen in that social learning type of an environment. And so we're also interested in looking for ways in which we can establish the same type of public-private partnerships with content as we have with the technology. These are all various activities and projects that we've created over the years, so we are now primarily an online service using these frequencies. The reason we were able to do some of this is because the FCC changed the technical configuration from instructional television fixed service, one-way video, to two-way data. And they changed the name. Instead of ITFS, we are now called the Educational Broadband Service, or EBS. Our organization thought we ought to change our name as well because we were no longer providing instructional television materials. Most of our materials were online. So that's when we changed our name to the Source for Learning, because we became a source for learning for all age groups in all types of various activities. The genesis of all of this was John's desire to pay back Ethel Palmer for recognizing in him the talent and the motivation necessary to be successful in life. And we want the same ideas for teachers to provide to their students, that each one of them can be successful. And because John decided to pay it forward by providing some capabilities to develop these systems, we want to carry through with that legacy and make it easier for teachers and students to enhance learning all over the world, and we do that every day.